There's a group of people who grew up dialing rotary phones and then watched the first iPhone change everything. And strangely, nobody really knows where to put them. Too young to fully belong to Gen X, too old to feel like a true millennial. They sit right in the middle, a generation so specific, researchers had to invent a new name for them. They called them Xennials. And what makes them interesting isn't just when they were born, it's what they lived through. Because this wasn't just a generation that grew up. This was a generation that crossed worlds. You started life in a completely analog reality. Boredom wasn't something you escaped. It was something you endured. You sat in it. You stared at walls. You made your own entertainment. You memorized phone numbers. You called a house and hoped the right person answered. You showed up to places without any way to check if plans had changed. If someone said, "Meet me at 3," you were there at 3. Because there was no backup plan. And if you missed your favorite TV show, that was it. Gone. Not delayed, not recorded, just gone. But then something happened, and it didn't happen slowly. It happened all at once. The internet arrived. Mobile phones appeared. Email replaced letters. Social media rewired connection. And suddenly, the world you understood wasn't the world you were living in anymore. Most generations grow up in one environment. You didn't. You grew up in two completely different realities. Your childhood trained you for one world. Your adulthood demanded you operate in another. Your teenage years looked nothing like your 20s. You went from handwritten notes to instant messaging, from knocking on doors to scrolling through profiles, from 3 ways to contact someone, to being reachable every second of the day. And you didn't just witness that shift. You had to adapt to it in real time. And here's the part that really matters. You adapted during the most important years of your life, the years where your identity is still forming, where your brain is still developing, where you're figuring out who you are. The part of your brain responsible for decision-making, adapting, and understanding complexity doesn't fully mature until your mid-20s, which means while the world was changing, you were changing too. Older generations sometimes resist technology. Younger generations were born into it. But you became fluent in both. You can sit across from someone and have a real conversation without feeling the need to reach for your phone. But you can also navigate new tech without fear. You remember what it felt like to be unreachable, to disappear for a few hours, and nobody panicked. And that's something a lot of people today have never experienced. It even changed how you see your own past. Because you grew up in a time where mistakes faded. They didn't follow you. They weren't uploaded. They weren't archived. They weren't searchable. They became stories. That bad haircut, that awkward phase, that stupid thing you said at a party, it lived in memory, not in evidence. And that matters more than we realize. Because human memory is supposed to change, to soften, to reshape, to let go of what doesn't matter. But when everything is documented, nothing really fades. And then, just as you were stepping into adulthood, the ground shifted again. The 2008 financial crisis. Right at the moment you were supposed to build your life, the system cracked. Jobs disappeared. Opportunities vanished. Stability became uncertain. And timing like that leaves a mark. Because when financial insecurity hits you early, it rewires how you think. About money, about risk, about safety. Even if things improve, there's always that voice in the background. Don't get too comfortable. It could all disappear again. So now you have this strange combination, a generation that knows how to adapt, but also knows how quickly things can fall apart. Flexible, but cautious. Confident, but aware. And yet, nobody really talks about this. The world tends to group people into simple categories: Generation X, Millennials, as if everyone in between had the same experience, but you didn't. You grew up with independence, no constant supervision, no location tracking, no instant replies. You solved problems on your own. You dealt with boredom, frustration, silence. You learned patience without even realizing it. But then you stepped into a world that promised connection, a world where everything was faster, easier, more accessible, and for a while, it felt like progress solved everything, until it didn't. Because now you can see both sides. You can see what we gained: connection, convenience, access to information instantly. But you can also see what we lost: stillness, patience, presence, the ability to just sit somewhere without reaching for something else. And maybe that's what defines you more than anything. You can hold both truths at the same time. You don't have to pick a side. You understand the past, and you function in the future. So if you've ever felt out of place, like you don't quite belong anywhere, too old for one group, too young for another, that's not a flaw. That's the point. Because in a world that keeps changing faster than anyone can predict, you've already lived through one of the biggest transitions in modern history. You know what it feels like when everything shifts, when the rules change overnight, when the future doesn't look like the past. And that might be your biggest advantage, not because it makes you special, but because it taught you something most people are still learning: how to adapt without losing yourself. Because that's the real challenge now, not just keeping up with change, but knowing who you are while everything around you keeps moving. If this resonated with you, subscribe. And if you want more of this, deeper insights into how we think, how we live, and how the world is changing, I've got more coming. I'll see you in the next one.